Hello everybody. I'm going to talk to you about separation of church and state and why I believe that it is needed. I'm going to explain to you what separation of church and state entails, along with some reasons for why we need it in our society. I would also like to respond to some of the arguments against separation of church and state. The main idea behind separation of church and state is to restrict what the government can do with religion, and also what religious groups can do with the government. The government cannot adopt religious policies for everyone, or place restrictions on other religious groups. It ensures that someone cannot use the government to impose their own religious beliefs on society. Government-funded corporations cannot promote religious beliefs on their employees, just as school teachers cannot force their beliefs on someone else's children. The government is to remain neutral in their support for religion. This helps ensure that all religious beliefs are treated equally, and that our government shows support for all citizens. Separation of church and state protects all citizens from religious suppression. There are several worthwhile arguments for implementing a separation of church and state. One is that the rights of the minority will be shunned by the rights of the majority. Atheists or members of a minority religion will find themselves ignored or even persecuted for their beliefs. The government could harm a religion, as in laws may be passed which discriminate against members of other churches. Also, religion could harm the government, as in we could become involved in a needless war because of our religious convictions. A person should be allowed to follow any belief that they see fit. That is their right granted by the Constitution. The First Amendment explicitly states that the government is to stay out of religious affairs. It states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free speech thereof. A large portion of the separation debate tends to revolve around our country's history, more specifically whether we were founded as a Christian nation. There are many arguments today over how the founders of our country felt about separation of church and state. Despite what one might hear from members of the religious right, many of the framers of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence were deists, theists, and Freemasons. There's very little evidence to suggest that they wanted our government to interfere with our religious beliefs. Our Constitution doesn't make a single reference to God or Christianity. If the framers of the document had really intended for us to be a Christian nation, I would think they would have talked about this in such an important document. Many of the framers were familiar with incidents in European nations that stemmed from religious hatred. They had no interest in giving those types of incidents a chance to replicate themselves in our country. Several of our most notable founders supported separation of church and state. Perhaps the greatest champion of religious freedom was Thomas Jefferson. There are numerous quotes taken from him that prove he was a staunch supporter of separating church and state. He once called the union of church and state a loathsome combination. There are also many quotes that reveal his beliefs in deism. His most well-known quote derives from a letter he wrote to the Danbury Baptists in 1802, where he used the phrase, building a wall of separation between church and state. The Declaration of Independence contains the statement, rights derive not from the God of Holy Scripture, but nature's God and natural law. Jefferson also wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. James Madison is known as the father of the Constitution. Like Jefferson, he also made numerous quotes advocating the separation of church and state. For example, in a letter to Baptist churches in North Carolina, he mentions having always regarded the practical distinction between religion and civil government as essential to the purity of both and as guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. His summary of the First Amendment states, Congress should not establish a religion and enforce the legal observation of it by law, nor compel men to worship God in any manner contrary to their conscience, or that one sect might obtain a preeminence, or two combine together and establish a religion in which they would compel others to conform. There is also proof that suggests that many other important founders, such as John Adams, George Washington, and Benjamin Franklin, have all supported separating church and state. The Treaty of Tripoli opens with the phrase, as the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion. This was signed by John Adams. This document portrayed the feelings of many of the founders had at the time. There are many myths about Washington's beliefs. Many have claimed that he was a devout Christian, but Washington's own writings reveal that he did not attend church often. In fact, Washington has talked very little about his spiritual beliefs. He was a Freemason, which tends to indicate a belief in deism, and he remained one until his death. He also once stated that every man ought to be protected in worshiping the deity according to the dictates of his own conscience. Close friends of his have also stated that he was a deist. Benjamin Franklin was another important man who, in his own biography, wrote about his beliefs in deism. Many of our founders were actually influenced by the writings of the British philosopher John Locke than by anything in the Bible. A non-religious government is not an anti-religious government. This is something that the religious right has trouble grasping. A non-religious government respects all religions by not favoring one over another, and allowing the citizens the right to their own religious freedom. The gov- Religion is a private matter that the government has no business being involved in. Our founders understood this and intended for it to be kept this way when they drafted the Constitution. Attempting to blend a religion with our government would be harmful to both. Thank you.